Opinions expressed as a part of the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute presentation are solely those of our panelists and do not express the views or opinions of their affiliates. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the third installment of Mindfulness Mondays. In keeping with the Association for the Study of African American Life and History and what they have deemed as this year's theme, Month, Black Health and Wellness. Today, I'll be discussing wellness pioneer Mary Rose Reeves Allen, who once declared the Negro woman as our standard. I'll start by setting the stage. In August of 1925, a parade of 30,000 unmasked Ku Klux Klan members proudly marched down Pennsylvania Avenue in Washington, D.C., as a public statement of its power and so called patriotism. The Washington Post called it one of the greatest demonstrations this city has ever known. Countless white residents cheered along the sidelines of the massive parade. The scene symbolized the deepening hostility many white Americans held toward African American World War I veterans returning to the U.S. after fighting abroad. The national aggression against them manifested in a significant uptick in lynching and conveyed the volatile nature of American racism. That same year, Howard University, a historically Black college also in the heart of the nation's capital, prepared for the most consequential pivot in its history, from 60 years of white leadership to its first African American president, Mordecai Johnson. With segregation offering Black colleges a monopoly on the Black intelligentsia, Johnson eventually led this institution into prominence as the capstone of Negro education, strengthening its academic offerings and recruiting and nurturing a stellar faculty. Howard students and alumni had pressed to summon Johnson to its helm. The university's transition really symbolized the temperament of the era's countless Black folks who sought, regardless of white belligerence, to articulate their own worldviews and demand autonomy in steering their own destinies. To this end, this era was known as the New Negro Renaissance. This invigorating spirit of self-determination was especially palpable in the imprint of African American women leaders in the spheres of business, culture, and education. In fact, the New Negro Renaissance owed much of its fervor to the well-connected Black women in DC, such as literary critic Jessie Fauset, poet and popular salon host Georgia Douglas Johnson, educator and activist Nannie Helen Burroughs, and Howard's own Dean of Women, professional tennis legend Lucy Diggs Slowe. In 1925, Mary Rose Reeves Allen arrived at the university as the founding director of the Department of Physical Education for Women. Immediately, Allen instituted the department's motto, "The Negro Woman," as our standard. And that just jumped out at me when I began to research her, and it stayed with me since then. And that motto really served as a clear indication that her unit would be much more than an exercise workshop. She was born in Louisville, Kentucky, and brought training from the Sargent School of Physical Education at Boston University, where she ultimately earned her master's degree. Remember, this is the turn of the century. All right, every white person, let alone Black person, is making it to graduate level education. Her professional career included teaching physical education and training courses in New Jersey public schools, at Hampton in Virginia, and beyond these experiences, she maintained a firm understanding of national history and the existing racial climate and how it threatened African American women's wellness. Taking a holistic approach to caring for the self, she envisioned a program curated specifically for Black women that emphasized physical, mental, and spiritual health as a medium to true beauty and self-regard, which was achievable in her view, despite white supremacy's relentlessness. In the official philosophy of the Department of Physical Education for Women, she named her concept total fitness and declared it necessary for living a meaningful life. She wove together interdisciplinary approaches within the department's coursework focused on mental health, spiritual wellness, and what she termed body aesthetics. In caring for the minds of Black women, Allen often addressed the harmful and lasting outcomes of embracing white supremacist media, which standardized beauty according to European norms. Allen's teaching challenged the idea of white women as the lone examples of beauty and femininity. Meanwhile, this is at a time during the first half of the century where very racist films serve as the common presentation for what entertainment looked like. You had films such as Birth of a Nation, Tarzan, Gone with the Wind, and all of them used white actresses to epitomize loveliness by making them the victims of dark and brutish characters. Media was racially charged, and Allen knew that the world her students would enter after leaving Howard would be biased accordingly. Her mission to protect and foster young Black women's intellectual development involved examining beauty as both a social construct and as an opportunity for reclamation. She stated the only standard we have, which is really not a scientific one, is one that has grown like everything else out of our present day civilization. She said it's a surface, empty kind of beauty, which tends to increase surface living and surface thinking. Instead of submitting to national ideas about attractiveness, Allen helped her students recognize racism as the essential feature of American beauty standards and encouraged her students to commit to physical training, personal development, and spiritual growth to develop a deeper meaning of beauty for themselves. Now, while she defined beauty apart from the superficial, she also appreciated fitness and adornment as opportunities to enhance the body as a work of art. Her leadership in women's sports activities fed Howard's renowned reputation beyond the city. She established and managed the Negro Women's Intercollegiate Athletic Association to develop in women, quote, the qualities of poise, beauty, and femininity by affording each individual who participates an opportunity to play in an atmosphere of dignity, courtesy, and refinement. The association hosted athletic tournaments for students from a variety of colleges, and she required her students under her purview to take a course in swimming. And during their last semester in her program, they were to choose from an elective including tennis, fencing, archery, golf, riflery, badminton, hockey, basketball, modern dance, you name it, social dance, tap dance, and advanced swimming. The fitness training she delivered merged her application for body sculpturing and her adoption of more traditional notions of acceptable feminine pursuits. I put that in quotes. In her view, that would be most advantageous to African American women navigating a world already filled with discrimination. Allen reasoned that involvement in sports should be useful, and therefore the elective a student selected should be based on her personal needs. She also talked about the importance of Black women being able to access therapy and spa treatments for themselves without necessarily having to interface with the realities of Jim Crow. And she taught her students how to use certain fragrances and oils to care for themselves, and particularly their faces and their bodies. This is, again, during a time in 1934. This is when Elizabeth Arden opened the first destination beauty spa in the United States. And meanwhile, Allen is teaching facial and water therapy techniques to her students to practice at home, because obviously these Jim Crow laws would have prevented Black women from being able to patronize establishments like Elizabeth Arden. Allen's program continually endeavored to tailor its offerings to meet the individual needs, dispositions, and interests of its students, which was especially significant since so few spaces offered this kind of consideration to Black women. Allen was also an early pioneer of mindfulness. She urged students to keep journals of their habits and develop an ongoing consciousness about their thoughts, sensations, and routines. She wanted them to remain active and avoid creating lives that felt productive but were actually not. She advised most American women don't realize today's pattern of life represents a change from physically active to physically passive. Before anyone protests that they could possibly be more active in their present busy life, perhaps they should take a look at what they're actually doing each day in terms of physical activity. Perhaps, she says, you are rushing frantically from one activity to another, one place to another, accomplishing a great deal in your profession or at home, in your community, or at your school. But she says you really need to ask yourself what is required of your body during all of this furious activity. If you keep a record for a week of how many hours you spend sitting, standing, walking, sleeping, eating, you might be surprised. Most of your hectic life, she says, you will find demands little physically. Cars, trains, escalators, and elevators take the physical effort out of getting from one place to another, and mechanical gadgets minimize the physical work in work, whether at home, on the job, or at school. And this is, 100 years before Calm app, right? This is before the experts, so to speak, really start to think of the ways in which technology keeps us from being physically active. Allen is challenging her students a century ago to really consider that. And she crowns her teaching on body care and mindfulness with attention to wellness of the soul. She condemned inequality and racism and warned that true beauty could only be achieved by way of good character. She admired the Plato quote, when a beautiful soul harmonizes with a beautiful form, the two are cast in one mold. She regularly reminded her students of their place on this spectrum, stating, at no time have I doubted the beauty of Howard women. With this mantra and corresponding coursework, Mary Rose Reeves Allen's 4-year academically grounded program rendered tangible strategies for securing job placement, challenging white supremacy, and safeguarding Black women's self-care during one of the most dismal periods in American racial history. For 42 years until her retirement in 1967, she organized and innovated programs at Howard, such as the Beauty Bazaar, Christmas program, Folk Fiesta, May Festival, a water show, and a sports day. The Beauty Bazaar showcased African American tastemakers in hair and fashion throughout the region. The May Festival, which culminated with the Queen's coronation, drew DC's Black elite to its audience and once featured a crown designed by international award-winning artist Lois Mallow Jones, an event which celebrated young Black college women. It garnered coverage from the Black press annually. Allen mused, the May Festival was my life at the university. She summarized her fundamental mission as follows. Using the Negro woman as our standard, we emphasize not only the importance of attaining physical beauty, but also beauty of the mind, proper attitude towards life and its problems, and an appreciation for the cultural and spiritual aspects of living. And so it is my hope that as we think about Allen's wellness work, which continues to really address a broad spectrum of Black women's bouts with beauty-centric racism and sexism, particularly in the public sphere, we consider popular personalities, Michelle Obama, Oprah Winfrey, Serena Williams, and countless others who have been compared in the headlines, in the media, to animals and men and deemed unattractive by common spectators and paid commentators alike. And of course, this same bigoted ridicule is also hurled at African American women not in the public eye and without wealth and widespread fan support. But here again, we can draw from Allen's lessons. She foresaw the need for comprehensive self-care as a resource for everyday Black women to protect and honor themselves without the need for approval from the broader society. Hence, the Negro woman as our standard. And so it is my hope that learning a bit more about Allen gives our audience more insight into Black women's wellness and its history and the pioneers who prioritized it before it was a trend. Thank you so much for joining us.